It was a warm morning in a small American town, and the main street buzzed with life. Shopkeepers arranged displays, commuters hurried to their destinations, and locals strolled along the sidewalks, sipping coffee and enjoying the day. Among the passers-by was a young black woman, Aisha Miller, standing in front of the window of a newly opened art supply store. Her eyes sparkled with inspiration as she admired the vibrant array of paints and brushes displayed. Art was Aisha's passion. She had always found solace in creating, using her work to tell stories of unity, strength, and resilience. Her father, James Miller, the town's mayor, had encouraged her creative pursuits since she was a child. "Never let anyone tell you where you belong, Aisha," he'd often remind her. "You define your own place in this world." Aisha's thoughts were interrupted when the door of the shop swung open and a woman stepped out. Dressed in a tailored blazer and carrying a designer bag, the woman's polished appearance exuded wealth and status. Her name was Marcy Miller, wife of the mayor. She was known in the town for her sharp tongue and superiority complex, a personality trait she often masked with a facade of charm in high society circles. Marcy froze when she noticed Aisha. Her expression shifted from neutral to disdainful as she scanned Aisha from head to toe. Her eyes lingered on Aisha's simple but neat outfit, a pair of jeans and a light blue blouse. Marcy walked closer, her voice cold and sharp. "Excuse me, what are you doing here?" Aisha turned to face her, confused but polite. "Just looking at the paints," she replied. "I'm an artist." Marcy's lips curled into a sneer. "An artist?" she scoffed, her voice loud enough for nearby pedestrians to hear. "Let me guess, you call graffiti art? This isn't your kind of place, sweetie. Why don't you move along?" Aisha, taken aback, held her ground. "I have every right to be here," she said evenly. "I'm not bothering anyone." Marcy stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. "Listen, don't get smart with me. People like you think they can go wherever they want these days. But let me remind you, this is a respectable store." By now, a small crowd had started to form, their curious gazes drawn by Marcy's raised voice. Aisha noticed the onlookers but remained composed, refusing to back down. "I'm not doing anything wrong," she said calmly. Marcy's face flushed with irritation. She glanced at the shop window and noticed a can of white paint sitting on a display table just inside the door. Without thinking, she grabbed the can, unscrewed the lid, and with a sharp motion, flung the paint toward Aisha. The thick white liquid splashed across Aisha's hair, face, and clothes. Gasps rippled through the crowd as they watched the scene unfold. Some began recording the incident on their phones. Marcy stood tall, satisfaction written across her face. "Maybe now you'll understand where you belong," she said with a smirk. Aisha froze, her mind racing between shock and fury. Slowly, she wiped her face, her hand trembling as the paint smeared across her skin. Her voice, however, was steady when she finally spoke. "Do you even know who I am?" Marcy laughed derisively. "Why should I care? You're nobody." Aisha locked eyes with her, her tone unwavering. "I'm Aisha Miller, the mayor's daughter." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder, and several people gasped audibly. Marcy's smug expression faltered as her brain processed what she just heard. "That's impossible," Marcy stammered, her voice rising. "My husband is the mayor. You're lying." From the back of the crowd, a young man holding his phone shouted, "She's telling the truth. I've seen her on his social media. She's his daughter." Marcy's face went pale. The confidence that had fueled her actions evaporated in an instant. Around her, the murmuring crowd grew angrier, and the phones filming the altercation seemed to close in. Aisha stood tall, covered in paint but radiating dignity. "You didn't just insult me," she said, her voice cutting through the noise. "You insulted every black person in this town, and you're going to answer for it." Marcy tried to stammer out a response, but the weight of the crowd's judgment silenced her. Somewhere, someone dialed the police, and the sound of sirens began to echo in the distance. The incident, caught on multiple phones, was already making its way onto social media, where it would soon explode into a national scandal. But at that moment, Aisha stood firm, determined not to let the humiliation define her, but to use it as a catalyst for change. That evening, the usually composed Mayor James Miller sat in his office, staring at his phone in disbelief. The video was all over the internet. Comments flooded in, ranging from anger to heartbreak, and some even questioning his leadership. How can a mayor who preaches equality have a wife like this? This isn't just about one woman, this is about systemic racism. We stand with Aisha, this behavior is unacceptable. James ran a hand over his face, the weight of the situation sinking in. He had always worked hard to promote unity in their small, diverse town, but now his wife's actions threatened to undo everything. He reached for his phone and dialed Aisha. "Dad," she said when she answered, her voice calm but tired. "I know you've seen it." "I have," he admitted, his voice heavy with emotion. "Aisha, I don't even know where to start. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," she said, though the quiver in her voice betrayed her. "But this isn't just about me, Dad. This is about so much more. People are angry, and they should be." "I know," James replied. "I'm calling a press conference tomorrow. This can't be ignored." "Good," Aisha said. "But it has to be more than words, Dad. People are tired of words." The next morning, a crowd gathered outside City Hall. Reporters from local and national outlets jostled for space, while townspeople filled the square, holding signs with messages like, "Justice for Aisha," and "End racism now." Some carried pictures of Aisha covered in paint, a stark reminder of the previous day's events. James stepped up to the podium, his face serious. Aisha stood beside him, her paint-stained clothes still visible under her coat. Her presence added weight to the moment. "Good morning," James began, his voice steady but resolute. "Yesterday, an incident occurred that has shaken our community and my family to its core. My wife, Marcy Miller, acted in a way that was not only inappropriate but deeply hurtful. Her actions were unacceptable and do not represent the values I stand for as a leader or as a father." He paused, letting the words sink in. Cameras clicked, and the crowd murmured. "I want to make one thing clear. No one is above accountability, not even my family. I have always believed in justice and equality, and I will not allow this incident to go unaddressed. I have asked my wife to publicly apologize, and I am stepping aside temporarily as mayor to ensure a full and impartial investigation into this matter." The crowd erupted with gasps and whispers. Aisha placed a hand on her father's arm, acknowledging the weight of his decision. Later that day, Marcy reluctantly faced the cameras. Dressed in muted colors, she looked pale and shaken, a far cry from the confident woman at the art store. "I want to start by saying that I am deeply sorry," she began, her voice trembling. "To Aisha, to my husband, and to this entire community, I apologize for my behavior. I acted out of ignorance, prejudice, and anger, and there is no excuse for what I did." She paused, searching for words, but her apology felt rehearsed. The crowd outside City Hall wasn't buying it. Shouts of "too little, too late," and "resign" echoed in the air. Marcy's lips tightened as she hurriedly left the podium, escorted by security. Marcy's apology did little to quell the outrage. The video had struck a nerve across the country, with news outlets airing segments on racism in small-town America. Pundits debated the mayor's responsibility, while activists called for systemic change. For Aisha, the fallout was personal. Strangers reached out with messages of support, while others hurled vitriol, blaming her for her father's temporary resignation. Despite the mixed reactions, Aisha refused to retreat into the shadows. She knew she had to turn her pain into action. Aisha began working with local activists and community leaders to organize a town hall meeting. The goal was clear: to create a space for people to discuss racism and share their experiences. The meeting was held in the town's community center, and it was packed. One by one, residents took the microphone. A young man spoke about being racially profiled by the police. An older woman shared her experience of being denied service at a restaurant decades ago. Each story added to the collective realization that Marcy's actions were not isolated, but part of a larger pattern. When it was Aisha's turn to speak, the room fell silent. Standing at the front, she took a deep breath. "What happened to me wasn't just about a can of paint," she began. "It was about years of prejudice, years of people like me being told where we belong. But I'm here to say that we belong wherever we choose to be." The crowd erupted in applause. Aisha's speech went viral, and soon she was invited to speak on national platforms. Her message resonated with people across the country, especially young Black women who saw themselves in her story. Activists praised her for turning a moment of humiliation into a call for change. Meanwhile, the town itself began to transform. The city council approved funding for anti-racism programs in schools and community outreach initiatives. Local businesses pledged to hire more inclusively and undergo diversity training. Though Marcy withdrew from public life, the memory of her actions lingered. For James, the incident served as a wake-up call. He returned to office months later with a renewed commitment to equity, vowing to make his town a model of progress. As for Aisha, she embraced her role as an artist and activist. Her first gallery exhibition included a piece titled "Painted Over But Not Erased," a canvas depicting her silhouette drenched in white paint, standing tall against a backdrop of vibrant colors. In an interview, she said, "I'm not just fighting for myself. I'm fighting for everyone who's ever been told they didn't belong. And I won't stop until the world is a place where we all feel at home." Aisha's life had changed overnight. What began as a humiliating moment had turned her into a symbol of resilience and resistance. News channels wanted interviews, social media was flooded with posts about her, and her inbox was a mix of support and hatred. Her father, James, tried to shield her from the worst of it, but Aisha was determined to face it head-on. "Dad," she said one evening as they sat in their living room, "if I back away now, it will send the wrong message. This isn't just about me. It's about everyone who's ever been told they're less than. I have to use this platform to make a difference." James nodded, pride and worry etched on his face. "Just remember, you don't have to carry this burden alone." A few weeks later, Aisha helped organize a march through the heart of town. Hundreds of people showed up, holding signs that read, "End racism now," and "Justice for all." The march was peaceful but powerful. Aisha walked at the front, her head held high, leading chants for equality and change. The march concluded in the town square, where Aisha addressed the crowd from a makeshift stage. "Racism isn't just an act of hate," she said, her voice echoing over the crowd. "It's in the systems we've built, the assumptions we make, and the way we treat one another. It's in the silence of those who look away instead of speaking up. But silence is no longer an option." The crowd erupted into applause, and Aisha felt a surge of hope. This wasn't just about the incident anymore. It was about something bigger, a collective demand for change. Behind the scenes, Aisha struggled with the emotional toll of being in the spotlight. Late at night, when the house was quiet, she would sit in her room, staring at the paint-stained blouse she'd worn that day. It was a stark reminder of her humiliation, but also a symbol of her strength. One evening, as she stared at the garment, tears streaming down her face, her phone buzzed. It was a message from a young girl in another state. "Hi, Aisha. I saw what happened to you, and it made me feel less alone. People treat me differently because of the color of my skin, too, but seeing you stand up for yourself gives me courage. Thank you for inspiring me." Aisha held the phone to her chest, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. Meanwhile, Marcy's life had unraveled. After her public apology, she had retreated into the confines of her home, avoiding the angry crowds and reporters camped outside. She became a national symbol of unchecked privilege and racism. James, still temporarily out of office, sat her down one evening. "Marcy," he said, his voice firm, "you've caused irreparable harm, not just to Aisha, not just to me, but to this entire community. You need to take responsibility beyond just words." Marcy looked at him, her usual air of confidence shattered. "What more can I do? I've apologized." "It's not enough," James said. "You need to listen to the people you have hurt and support the changes we're fighting for." Reluctantly, Marcy agreed to participate in a series of community forums organized by Aisha and local leaders. Her presence at these events was met with hostility, but she began to listen to the stories of those she had dismissed for so long. The first forum was held in the same community center where Aisha had spoken weeks earlier. This time, it was filled with residents of all backgrounds, sharing their experiences of racism and exclusion. Marcy sat in the back, her face pale as she listened to story after story. An elderly Black woman spoke about being denied housing decades ago. A young Latino man shared his struggles with racial profiling. A single mother described the hurtful stares she endured at the grocery store with her biracial children. When Marcy was called to speak, the room fell silent. She hesitated before standing, gripping the edge of the chair for support. "I know my words won't erase what I've done," she began, her voice unsteady. "But sitting here today, hearing these stories, I realize how blind I've been. My actions weren't just a mistake. They were part of something much bigger, something deeply wrong. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want to be part of the solution moving forward." The room remained quiet. Some nodded in acknowledgement, while others crossed their arms in skepticism. Marcy's journey toward redemption had only just begun. As the forums continued, Aisha found solace in her art. One evening, she unveiled her most ambitious project yet, a large canvas painted entirely in shades of white. At first glance, it seemed blank, but upon closer inspection, subtle textures and shapes emerged, layers of paint creating a story of resilience. At the center was a faint outline of a figure standing tall. Beneath it, Aisha wrote, "You tried to erase me, but I became more visible." The painting became the centerpiece of a new exhibit titled Unbroken, dedicated to stories of overcoming racism and prejudice. The exhibit attracted national attention, and Aisha was invited to speak at galleries and universities across the country. Months later, the town began to change. Anti-racism education was introduced in schools, local businesses committed to diversity training, and a new community center was built, focused on celebrating the town's multicultural heritage. James resumed his role as mayor with a renewed commitment to equality. Though his reputation had been scarred, his willingness to hold his family accountable earned him respect. As for Marcy, she continued attending forums and working with local organizations. While many remained skeptical of her intentions, she quietly supported Aisha's initiatives, knowing she had much to prove. On the anniversary of the incident, Aisha led another march through town, this time joined by hundreds more than the first. The atmosphere was different, hopeful, united. At the end of the march, Aisha stood before the crowd, her voice steady and strong. "This isn't just my story," she said. "It's ours. And as long as we stand together, no amount of hate can divide us." The crowd erupted in applause, and Aisha looked out over the sea of faces, feeling a sense of closure. She had turned her pain into progress, her humiliation into hope.